Well, good evening, everyone. The time being 5:30, I'd like to open the meeting. My name is Paula Reid, Mayor of Kingborough. It's my pleasure to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting on Monday the 19th of September 2022. We don't have anyone with us in the public gallery this evening, but I'm sure we have a number of people who are watching along on YouTube. So I now officially declare this meeting open. I wish to advise that council meetings are recorded and made publicly available on our website. In accordance with council's policy, I will ask the General Manager to confirm that the recording has started.
Confirm, Mayor.
Thank you. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, pay respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community. Our attendees this evening are myself, Councillor Reid, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Westwood, Councillor Bastone, Councillor Cordova, Councillor Fox, Councillor Gladeright, Councillor Grace, Councillor Midgley, Councillor Street and Councillor Wass. From our staff this evening, we have the General Manager, Mr Arnold, the Chief Financial Officer, Mr Breen, the Director of Engineering Services, Mr Reeve, the Director of Governance, Recreation and Property Services, Mr Smee, Manager of Development Services, Ms Tyler Moore, our Media and Communications Advisor, Ms Adams, the Communications and Engagement Support Officer, Ms Klein, and the Executive Assistant, Mrs Morton. There are no apologies.
Could I ask a question?
There are no apologies this evening. We haven't come to questions yet, Councillor Grace.
I just wanted to raise, Mayor, whether we were going to have a minute's silence for the Queen.
I'm just about to do something, if you could just
Thank you.
wait.
I didn't get a notice of that, sorry.
Yep. So before proceeding tonight, it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. Probably varying degrees of opinion about whether Australia should be part of the Commonwealth or not, but the time for that debate is certainly not now. For now, we should all recognise that the Queen has been a significant figure in the lives of people right around the world during her 70-year reign. And I think that the outpouring of grief that we are seeing now shows how highly regarded she was by ordinary people. She reigned with dignity, with charm, with empathy, with grace and with good humour through considerable periods of change right around the world. I especially loved her most recent appearance with Paddington Bear, that I think endeared her to a whole new generation of people. As her funeral is being held in London tonight, on behalf of Kingborough, I offer our condolences to Her Majesty's family. I feel for them now that they are in the unenviable position of having to grieve so very publicly for their matriarch, while still undertaking their public duties as is expected of them. I wanted to just finish with a quote on leadership that I found recently from the Queen, which I thought was very appropriate. I know of no single formula for success, but over the years I have observed that some attributes of leadership are universal and are often about finding ways of encouraging people to combine their efforts, their talents, their insights, their enthusiasm and their inspiration to work together. So on behalf of Kingborough Council, on behalf of the residents of Kingborough, I think we all collectively send our condolences to the royal family on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, and may she rest in peace.
Can I just add one thing to that we're blessed as a council, Mayor, to have a letter from Her Majesty only a few months ago.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Councillor Grace.
Acknowledging our community, with also from...
Councillor Grace, I'm not going to open it up to debate, otherwise we're going to be here for a long period of time.
I'm very sorry.
I'm just making a statement, and we will leave it at that. Thank you. We are on page 1 now, confirmation of minutes. The motion is that the minutes of the open session of council meeting number 17 held on the 5th of September 2022 be confirmed as a true record. I'm looking for a mover. I have one in Councillor Fox, seconded Councillor Westwood. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Workshops held since the last council meeting. We did not have a workshop last Monday evening. Declarations of interest. Does any councillor have an interest they would like to declare? No? Thank you. Transfer of agenda items. Is there any item on the agenda that a councillor would like to transfer from open into closed session? No, thank you. We don't have any members of the public here this evening, so there will be no questions without notice from the public. So we turn to questions on notice from the public, and if members of the public do wish to submit a question, they can do so by sending it to us by email at kc@kingborough.tas.gov.au. We had 2 questions on notice. The first is from Mr Roger Tong, with an officer's response from Mr Reeve, and it's in relation to the Browns River Bridge and the disability ramp at Kingston Beach. Second question is in relation to nuisance lighting. It was from Mr David McQuillan and an officer's response from Mr Steele. Coming now to page 3, questions without notice from councillors. Does any councillor wish to ask a question? Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering whether there have been any results from Council's investigation into the possible illegal clearance of vegetation at Dens Point on Bruny Island.
Mr Smee.
Through you, Mayor, I don't have details of that. I'd need to take it on notice, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next I had Councillor Cordova and then Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question is about the audit panel report on page 108, if I might ask about the climate change scope document. So this is in the appendix of tonight's agenda, page 108. It says the scope document prepared by WLF on the climate change project was accepted by the panel. The review will look into whether the climate change plan and policy are currently informing the planning and operational levels and linked to other key council strategies and plans. So my question is just, I'm just seeking a bit more detail. I'd be interested to know things like the time frame for that review, probably how long that will take, who will be included in that consultation process, will it come back to council for further scrutiny, or whether it's operational in nature. It may very well be, so it might not come back to council, but I'd be keen to know. And will consideration be given to climate change resourcing to ensure the plan has the requisite funding to achieve its aims?
Mr Breen, I believe, can help us with that one.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Wise and Ferguson, WLF, they're just commencing the audit now. They've done a fair bit of work on the scoping side in having discussions with particularly the Environmental Services Manager and planning and engineering and finance staff. So they've done a lot of work to put an appropriate scope together. They plan to undertake the work over the next 2 months, I think it is, and with a thought of a report coming to the December audit panel meeting. So I guess essentially it's an operational report, but councillors do have the ability to access that report when it's finalised.
Thank you. Mr
Thank
Breen,
you.
Councillor Cordova, a further question?
A further question. This one is about salmon farms, noise and pollution complaints. So with respect to offshore salmon farms, my first question is, has Kingborough Council run any community engagement or consultation with local residents who live within earshot of salmon farm operations, including those who can hear and see the wellboats from their properties? Have we undertaken any consultation about offshore salmon farming to find out what the community thinks about the issue? That's my first question.
General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Cordova, only this afternoon I received yet another email from a resident of Kingborough in relation to a noise complaint. It was forwarded to me just for information, ostensibly, but I did follow that up with our environmental health officers. Noise complaints from anything that is offshore are the remit of the EPA. The complaint that, or the intended complaint that I saw via email today, actually copied in the EPA, and also the Minister and the CEO of the EPA.
Thank you. And just to follow up, 2 more questions on that. So, has Kingborough Council investigated the opportunity to apply seabed rates to offshore salmon producers that are operating in Kingborough's waters or waters adjacent to Kingborough?
General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. The short answer, Councillor Cordova, is no. but I am aware from my personal readings that a council on the West Coast did investigate that with little success.
Thank you. And my final question is, will council consider collaborating with other locally affected councils, such as Huon Valley and Tasman Council, to create a working group on offshore salmon farms that can liaise with community groups and stakeholder organisations, such as those that are making some of these complaints? And the idea of a working group would be to address some of those community concerns being raised by our constituents in relation to environmental harm, marine debris, and noise and light pollution.
General Manager.
Through you, Mayor, it's certainly not something that an officer would be recommending Councillor Cordover, given that, as I said in your earlier question, it is in the remit of EPA.
Thank you.
Councillor Grace, and then Councillor Bastow.
Yeah, I have a few. Firstly, when council deal with closed session issues, the meeting is then, the closed session is adjourned and the open session of council then is resumed. Then council make notes of what was disclosed in closed session. My question is, if we're asked a question by our ratepayers regarding, i.e., any one of the things that's discussed in closed session, but listed again in open session, without talking about the report or whatever, why are we in breach of the Local Government Act?
The General Manager.
Through you, Mayor, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, Councillor Grace, but if I have picked it up correctly, the answer is that any decision of council in closed session is not released to the public other than what the council resolved during the closed session.
Councillor Grace.
I won't dwell on the whole thing about the closed session stuff because it's become a major issue which I will pursue when I leave this council in a month. My second question is, I raised issues about the failure of road sealing of about $300,000. I may be wrong on the actual figure, how much failure has occurred. Why haven't we as councillors had a report on this? And I'm talking about, if you want an instance or couple, Beach Road Snug, Charlton Street, etc., and I know of others.
Yep, Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, so I'm not aware of the quantity of failures in roads that you're actually mentioning there, Councillor Grace. I'm happy to take on board any particular instances you may actually have. It is not unusual for roads to have isolated failures there which are dealt with on a maintenance basis as they occur. Generally for new works there, they're few and far between, but it doesn't preclude that actually happening in particular circumstances. So I would really need the details of what you're talking about in the particular instances there, and happy to follow those up individually.
We've been careful through you, Mayor. With all due respect, I raised this before through the council to Mr. our engineer, and he said he had looked at those failures. And I'm wondering why we haven't had a report on those. Okay, go back and check a tape and you'll find that is the case. Without taking that any further, I have another question with Tiers Road Snug. I understand now the contractor has commenced work in Tiers Road Snug, which is pleasing. As we know, and I mentioned to council before, in its process of design, was it dealing with a subdivider that looks like eventually, well, God knows when, but one day we might get another 300 or 400 lots. I'm not sure the capacity of this subdivision. There's quite a few lots on an entrance off Tiers Road and also off Channel Highway. Have we spoken to that developer where he's going to have access off Tiers Road, whether or not we will put the entrance driveways in at his cost while we construct the road, rather than build a nice new road and 6 months later we come along and dig it up again?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, so this is a common problem you might actually have where you have issues with future development potentially occurring that can occur within a shorter period of time or a longer period of time there. I could name a couple there. Jamala Road's a great example of one at the moment there where we've just completed some work there. It's more than likely that any future subdivision of that particular road there will be some years down the track. I guess we need to make some decisions based on what is needed at the time. We do take into account what is the future development in any particular area, and we try and allow for that in terms of our design as well without actually compromising the usability of what we're actually doing. I don't believe there was any specific discussions with the developer as to what may be required outside their particular property, but I'm happy to actually chase that up with the designer.
Mayor, I raised this 12 months ago, the same issue, and asked our staff would they negotiate or talk to the developer. This again
Is there another question coming, Councillor
Well,
Grace?
the question is it's costing additional money, ratepayers, and wasting money.
It's not a question, Councillor Grace.
Well, okay.
You've asked the question and Mr. Reeve has answered.
Yes, I figured it'd be a bit hard.
Okay, all right. We're not. No. Okay. Right. Well, if you make it a question, then please proceed.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for cutting me off. I'm used to that.
Councillor Grace, we haven't had the pleasure of your company around this table for about 4 weeks. Please, that's correct. You have missed 2 meetings, and things have been progressing very well. So if you could please stick to the meeting procedures regulations that govern all of us around this table, not 3/4 of us and not you. In accordance with the meetings procedures regulations, this is the time to ask questions and do so in an orderly manner. So I will allow you to ask more questions, but please keep the preamble short and not make it statement time.
Oh, I'm sorry if I do that, but I've been doing it for 22 years. But anyway, Madam Chair, the other question that I raise is I sent a councillor request in regarding an issue on Tinderbox Road some weeks ago about flooding at a property at that particular place, and I asked whether it be permitted that I meet engineers and have a look at that site. So my question is, how long does it take before we get an answer? And how long does it take before ratepayers get satisfaction out of the council?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, you may recall, Councillor Grace, I did send you an email on that particular matter there and actually offered to meet with you in terms of that particular matter. So I still am quite willing to meet with you in terms of that. So happy to actually arrange a time with you outside of this meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very sorry if I overstepped the market, and I'm sorry you missed me over the last.
Councillor.
Point of order. We're in question time. Councillor Grace.
Deputy Mayor.
And don't pull faces at me from across the table.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bastone and then Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question is probably to Mr. Smee, through you, Mayor. Have all the sculptures purchased annually by the Council from the Art Farm exhibition been removed from Birches Bay and placed in appropriate locations around Kingborough? If so, where are they located? And if not, why not?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, I can't answer the most recent ones because I haven't been managing the Community Service Department for some years, but certainly the initial purchases were installed at our wetlands, and that's now been deemed not the most appropriate place, and they have gone elsewhere within the municipal area. But in terms of the specific details, it's probably best to take the question on notice and provide a more detailed response.
Thank you very much. Also, my second question, when will work commence on the new toilets at the Woodbridge Hall?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, as soon as the builder is available.
Thank you. And my third question, which will also be probably to you, Mr. Smee. I note that the money which was earmarked for the Silverwater Park has been returned to the open space account. Various reasons for the delay have been blamed on the environmental planner leaving, COVID causing delays in equipment purchases. Has the design now been completed? If so, when will the councillors cite this design?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, yes, the design has been completed. In effect, it is the design that was prepared by our previous urban designer without flipping the car park and the playground. So we're leaving the existing access road and car parking in place. There's money in the budget to do a resheet of the gravel. So yes, there is a design and I can make that available if required.
And could I ask when we anticipate the start of the park?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, Silverwater Park is very wet at the moment, so we could not get any equipment in there. So once it's dried out.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. A few questions from me. The first one relates to the Mayor's diary, your meeting at Burwood Drive.
Yes.
Wondering if there's an update from there, and I have some follow-up questions as well.
No, there isn't, because there wasn't. It was more a general conversation about the way that series of works are carried out, and it was a broad-ranging one about a number of issues. But at this stage, no, there's no further update. There are some issues that I've made note of and taken some photographs that perhaps some considerations need to be done. For example, how you can actually get across from the top of Woodlands Drive across to the park at the top, because there's no access ramp there. So that's the sort of issues that I'm following up.
Great, thank you. I had some further points from residents there, just in regards to the footpath ending. So a question about, putting this in a question, yes there is. The footpath ends at the driveway to 98 Burwood Drive, and the water reservoir owned by Tas, and the water reservoir is owned by Tas Water. This driveway is suffering from major drainage issues, impacts the use of the footpath, and provides an ongoing maintenance cost to council. Are there any plans to address this issue? I'm not sure, Mayor, if you saw that one with the bags outside Tas Water.
I did indeed. Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, yes, we are aware of some other individual areas on the end of the works that were completed there, so we have put them onto some future plans to actually have a look at. Bearing in mind there is some plans to do some additional footpath works also in Burwood Drive in the 5-year plan, but certainly trying to improve some of the end extents of where we've actually finished the footpath at the moment there would be one for future consideration.
Thank you. And just noting on one section of Burwood Drive, the footpath, I can't remember what road it is, sorry, and I can't see it in my notes. The footpath sort of ends not to the end of the road. Mayor, I can't remember if you remember what road that is. It's the last row before Brightwater, and there was tape and things like that there. I guess really the residents are curious to know why there's been a lot of work that keeps going back, and the drainage was done, then it was redone, and then bits aren't kind of finished, and I guess wondering how much of the $180,000 budget for the footpath has been spent, which I'm sure you can't answer that right now.
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, most of it's actually been spent. That little bit area that you're talking about there, there was some issues with particularly vehicles actually cutting the corner there, so we changed some of the drainage channel there, and then we had some issues with vehicles cutting up that area there, so we had to go back and do some additional work. We also extended the footpath slightly around the corner there to try and avoid some of those issues and better direct people back onto that particular road that you're actually referring to. So there was never any intention to have a footpath that would go all the way down that road, bearing in mind that it's actually a low traffic volume use road. So that's the reason behind that.
Great, thank you very much. Yesterday, a few of us attended the opening of the Greens, the Bowls Club. One of the issues was raised about the potholes. Yes, there could be some major maintenance in regards to that, but if there was just filling a bit of gravel in some of the potholes, is that just a works matter that the Bowls Club president could write to council about? Or
I did indicate to them yesterday at the event that they should do that so we could put a service request in, so there'll be a service request coming.
Thank you. Wondering, have we received any revenue from the housing sales at Kingston Park?
Mr. Breen.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. My understanding is not at this stage, but we are now starting to get some SUPs coming through, so I would imagine from the houses that have been built, we will start getting some income. We've had sales of land, so we're getting obviously some, not revenue, but cash from the sale of land, so that's starting to flow through as well.
Thank you. And just wondering, is that cash revenue, is it on track, on timeline as what council estimated?
Mr. Breen.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. So as far as the land sales are concerned, I guess the one thing that's holding things up at the moment is the development application, which is going through a process. So until that gets that process gets sorted out, then the revenue from the sale of that next lot of land won't be able to come through to council. So it is being slightly delayed, and then depending on what happens after that, there could be further delays.
Thank you. And wondering if there's an update timeline for Main Street Transform Kingston project starting.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, the intent is to go to tender in October, November, and bring a report to council for approval in December, with work to start in the new year. We may this year get some work done on the property that we've purchased in terms of removal of that particular house. But yeah, that's the time frame in the plan.
Thank you. And does that also include Pardelote Lane as well as part of that works, or is that separate?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, that will come on the tail end of those works.
Sorry, and in regards to a design, that design has gone out as part of a tender process, is that correct? But has Pardelote Lane been part of that design, or is that a new design?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, we have an existing design already done for Pardelote Parade, but as you're aware, we do have a proposal at a very high level stage at this point for a multi-storey car park, which would have impacts on the design of the Pardelote Parade, which is now Fantail Parade, by the way.
Councillor Grace, did you have another question?
Yes, I did have another question. In fact, I have two. Sorry about that. One being the user charges for the football grounds. Mayor, I was checking my documentations here a few days ago, and I noted that council's Mr. Smee made a report to this council regarding user fees on football grounds, etc. some time back now. I think it might have been 12 months ago. My question is, why wasn't that part of the previous report from Mr. Wade? That, I believe, would have helped councillors tremendously.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but certainly both reports in relation to this matter came from Mr. Wade. There was some subsequent information that I sent out to councillors that has been post those reports coming to council, which has been around the process of engagement.
Councillor Grace.
I don't know about that, but anyway, we'll move on to the next question. Mayor, with your mayoral car, under the terms of the council policy, are you to keep a logbook? Is that still in place? So a logbook for the mayoral car is available to be audited?
No, but, General Manager.
Through you, Mayor, the Mayor is required to comply with the council policy for usage of the mayoral car, and if any councillor wishes to access a council vehicle, we can make arrangements for that too.
No, that's not the question again, sorry. Is there a logbook in the mayoral car?
General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Grace, the requirement for a log would only apply if the Mayor was using the mayoral vehicle for private use, and that does not happen.
But the policy says that there should... Oh, sorry, you answered it saying the Mayor doesn't use it for private use. Okay.
So in the event, and I believe this is what's occurred with previous mayors, in the event that I did have to use it for private use for some reason, then I would provide a log of the kilometres travelled so that I could then reimburse that amount of private use.
So therefore you should have a logbook in that vehicle as per our policy.
Well, it doesn't have to be a logbook, it could be just a matter of checking the kilometres on the car and making a note of them. There's no requirement for it to be a logbook that I've been informed of since I took over the car. It didn't come with a logbook, and I have not been using it for private use.
Just following that then, Mayor, if I may, I thought that council workmen using council vehicles had to log their mileage, etc. in the vehicles. This is, I don't mean the construction people so much, but the inspectors and so forth.
General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Grace, yes, there are requirements for council staff that access the pool vehicles, but again, I repeat my previous answer to you in relation to the Mayor. The Mayor does not use the mayoral vehicle for private use.
Any further questions? If not, we will continue. The open session of council, I beg your pardon, page 3, there were no questions on notice from councillors. So the open session of council now adjourns and the planning authority commences at 6:04 p.m. We are on page 4, DA 2022-37, development application for 6 multiple dwellings and demolition of existing buildings at 47 Beach Road in Margate, with a recommendation on page 17. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. I've got a mover in Councillor Gladeright and a seconder in Councillor Fox. Councillor Gladeright.
Thank you. This application is for the demolition of the existing dwelling, carport and associated outbuildings, and the construction of 6 multiple dwellings. The proposal is located within Margate and is sited in an area with a range of infill multi-unit development. The proposal, I'm happy to report, is located on a large lot size and is able to accommodate 6 multiple units while providing for adequate setbacks and outdoor amenity. The application is recommended for approval subject to 14 conditions. There were 3 representations and I feel confident that those have been adequately addressed, so I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Claydright. Any further contributions? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is, as has been touched on, it's a largish lot, 2,023 square metres, and the things that I guess I'll go through some of the issues that I think are worth raising, and I believe they are adequately addressed in the report. There'll be 2 car spaces for each unit plus 2 visitor car parks. No additional access is proposed. The site itself is 800 metres, or about a 10-minute walk from the main Margate town. Importantly for me, there are trees of very high conservation value along the Wyburton Place Road Reserve, a stand of eucalyptus including obliqua and ovata. And the recommendation here in the report is there are several tree protection measures and the vegetation is designed for retention. The use here is categorised as residential, multiple dwelling under the scheme, which is a use that requires permitted assessment in a low density residential zone, and we're going to come back to this momentarily. Whilst the application is classified as a permitted use, it relies on performance criteria to comply with the scheme, and therefore it's discretionary. In terms of the issues raised by the representors, things like setbacks, it is true that whilst units 1, 3 and 5 don't comply with the setback, as we can see on page 8, the setback is 2.9 metres, which falls just short of the required 3 metres, and the retention of vegetation on the road reserve will contribute to the screening in this proposal. So that is again why it is so important to have these those street trees on the road reserve. To the issue of light penetration and shadowing, which was raised by the representors, particularly the risk of overshadowing neighbouring solar systems, I acknowledge that that was an issue that was raised by a representor, and in a general sense I think that this is a critical issue that the planning scheme needs to address, but specifically for this proposal, those shadow diagrams, figure 3 on page 10, indicate that the resultant overshadowing or reduction in sunlight is, and I quote, according to the officer's report, there is no unreasonable overshadowing or reduction in sunlight to dwellings on adjoining lots, end quote. Now, in my opinion, there is no amount of reasonable overshadowing. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have any overshadowing because obviously in Tasmania where it's cold, natural light is very important. However, in my opinion on that is obviously overruled by the planning scheme. Now, the 4 trees of very high conservation value and the 1 tree of high conservation value, they're of critical importance, and I'm very pleased to see that the arborist's assessment has demonstrated the retention of all trees is feasible and that the level of encroachment onto the tree protection zone of less than 10% in the case of trees 3, 4 and 9 and encroachment of 16.5% on tree 2 has been deemed acceptable by the arborist. And I think it's worth noting that trees of high conservation value and very high conservation value in the road reserves of urban areas such as Margate would surely benefit from the council developing, funding and implementing a street tree strategy for Kingborough. I've got a few questions. The first one is, fundamentally, is the low density zoning in Margate out of date? And the reason I ask that question is if we turn our attention to page 7, the local area objectives, the implementation strategy, so this is the second column of the table on page 7, it says, A, future residential development is to be directed towards suitable new areas rather than encouraging the infill of existing suburban areas at higher densities, except where the infill is in close proximity to the town's commercial centre. So obviously I've already mentioned that this is about a 10-minute walk from the town's commercial centre, so I think it's close. But really my question is the implementation strategy for Margate fit for purpose in 2023? Because it sounds to me like it's almost the exact opposite of what we think. So any commentary around that, please?
Ms Tyler-Moore.
Through you, Mayor, the comments made by Councillor Cordova with respect to the siting of this property within Margate and proximity to services is correct. And the planning scheme is what it is when it's written on the day. We must assess it against that. But moving forward, as described in the other matters in section 2.6, we do outline that it's intended to upzone this area to be general residential, which is more appropriate, particularly now that they've got reticulated sewage throughout the area. So it will be upzoned and be more appropriate to meet the needs of housing in the municipality.
Thank you. And I do have a follow-up question to that, because I think this is really the crux of it, is that do we agree that the density from the new draft planning scheme for the purposes of this report is actually seen to be more relevant? What I mean by that is right now we are assessing this against the Kingborough interim planning scheme 2015, but of course, as we all know, that took place at a time before there was reticulated sewage available in Margate. So I guess my question is, with respect to that, are we right now, as a planning authority, assessing this against KIPS 2015, or are we essentially making the call to assess it against the incoming planning scheme?
Ms. Tyler Moore.
Through you, Mayor, it's a requirement as a planning authority to assess it against the instruments that are available on the day. It must be assessed against KIPS. As you will see in the report, it didn't make the acceptable solution of density, so therefore it was assessed against performance criteria. So that is not to say that we have ignored the current scheme and we are just choosing to look at the new scheme, because that's not yet approved. It's only by way of information that 2.6 is there to give an idea of it, but certainly the assessment by the planning officer is done on the current planning scheme.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you. And I guess that leads to my final remarks, which is that whilst we are measuring this against KIPS, it is worth noting that the nature of KIPS is essentially, in my opinion, not fit for purpose anymore, because, and I'll quote page 15, I think it is, it says that Margate and Snug are now connected to the Blackmans Bay wastewater treatment plant, providing reticulated sewage capacity that was not available prior to 2019. So it certainly wasn't available when KIPS was approved in 2015. And so now we're in this situation where, in fact, Margate can and should have a higher density. It is indeed close to services. It does have a lot of services available to it. And we've already seen a lot of those changes as a result of the access to reticulated sewage. And in fact, the report does show that there are a number of developments on Beach Road that are of a very similar density to this. So I think it refers to number 51, Beach Road. There's about 6 of them that are listed in the report, which are these multi-unit developments of a very similar size to this one that we're looking at. Ultimately, I think that whilst I acknowledge the representor's concerns, these are the kinds of infill developments that we will see and that we'll continue to see. And it will certainly ameliorate the housing crisis, but it will also give us a diversity of housing stock choices. And I think what I appreciate here is that the arborist's assessment has actually taken into account those very high conservation value trees. And I do believe that we can have infill development where it's appropriate, in a density that's appropriate, that maintains urban vegetation, tree canopy coverage, maintains this idea of bringing nature into the centre and making livable communities that are connected and covered with vegetation. So we can have both. We can have high density with a great natural environment. So I will be supporting this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Are there further contributions? Councillor Gladwright, did you want to sum up? No? Then I will put the motion, moved by Councillor Gladwright, seconded by Councillor Fox, with the recommendation on page 17. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. The Planning of Authority now adjourns and the open session of Council recommences at 6:14 p.m. On page 60, petitions still being actioned. There are no petitions still being actioned. Petitions received. Order, please. Point of order, please. Could you just stop the side chatter so we can continue on? Page 60, petitions still being actioned. There are no petitions still being actioned. Petitions received in the last period at the time the agenda was compiled, no petitions had been received. We turn now to the financial report for August 2022 with a recommendation on page 61. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved Councillor Westwood, seconded Councillor Street. Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Mayor. We have before us the financial report for August 2022. As it is the second month of the current financial year, the report shows that Council is on track against its budget expectations that were developed when Council approved the budget for the 2022-23 financial year. I guess as we track forward over the rest of the financial year, councillors will need to keep a close eye on the current external environment. No doubt Council's budget will be subject to some of the similar pressures that households will start to face in a high inflationary environment. But at this point in time, we are tracking as we expected to when we set the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Councillor Cordover and then Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Cordover.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. The first one is about, it says at the top of page 61 that statutory fees and fines are down. They're 47,000 under budget due to revenue from planning being 19,000 under budget as a result of post-approval income being less than expected. My question is, what is included in post-approval income and what are some of the forecasts about this situation?
Mr. Breen.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Look, essentially post-approval income is income that we get essentially from sort of subdivision type work, it would be engineering type work, those sort of things. So unfortunately it's a very unpredictable income line, and it's also subject to, we can get larger amounts at a single point. So sometimes we'll have timing differences. Other times it might be that our subdivision work's gone very quiet. There's not a lot of work on it at a particular time. So it's hard to predict, and it is very fluctuating. So not surprising it's a little bit under.
Thank you. And just one more question, Mayor. This one's about a few dot points down from that last one. Other expenses are 143,000 over budget due to government-funded remissions being 106,000 over budget. Those are due to timing differences. And then this is what my question is about. It says, quote, also councillor expenses are $17,000 over budget due to the annual payment for the maintenance of the electoral roll. I'm curious about what is that annual maintenance of the electoral roll? How does that work?
Mr. Breen.
Yeah, so every year the electoral division does significant work on the electoral roll, and we get charged an amount for that work. What we have done this year is we budget for that over the 12 months because we never really know what the timing is. So unfortunately the cost has come in the first couple of months of the year, so that's the reason for the budget overrun there. But that generally it's just work that they do on the electoral roll.
Thank you. And a final question on that. Has there been discussion about that cost being shared with state government? Like, my question is, why is it a Kingborough Council cost rather than a Tasmanian Electoral Commission cost or a state government cost more broadly?
Mr. Breen.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. My understanding is it's a cost associated with the councils each wear individually themselves, so I can't see the state government wanting to take up any of that particular cost.
But we might be able to ask them, or could we ask them? Is that something that there's been discussion about at any stage through Legat, maybe?
General Manager.
Through you, Mayor. Happy to ask the question, Councillor Cordover, but not expecting a positive response.
Thank you. More power to you. Thank you. That's all. Councillor
Grace.
Yeah, on page 61, 1, 2, 3, other income is 73,000 over budget, primarily due to the private works revenue of 60,000 under budget due to the loss of the state government contract. My question to that would be, Mayor, why hadn't we got a report, firstly, as a sitting councillors? Why didn't we get a report from staff to say that we had lost that contract? When I asked the question in this council and around this table, and council already knew they'd lost that contract. This is appalling to treat elected members in this way, in my honest opinion. We should have been notified that we had lost that contract, and particularly when I raised the question.
Okay, so the question is, why were we not notified? Mr. Reeve.
Sorry, Mayor.
So the question is, why were councillors not notified? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Mr. Reeve, could you assist us
I have
with that
another
one?
question to that.
Through you, Mayor, look, it's not unusual for council to have a number of different contracts with a number of different people external to council. We don't routinely provide reports to council on each contract if they for whatever reason that the other organisation decides to go elsewhere and look at other options, which was the case here. So that's not a routine thing that that would actually happen.
No, and I agree with that, but why wasn't we told was my question. And the second thing, my second question...
Councillor Grace, Mr Reeve has answered your question. He's just given you a response.
Yes, okay.
Let's not have commentary as to whether you like it or not.
I didn't come...
Next question, please.
And my next question is, what sort of an impact is that going to have now on the Bruny Island workforce and the amount of plant, etc. we've got on that island?
Mr Reeve.
Will that be reviewed? That's my question.
Through you, Mayor, in the short term, none, because as I've sort of explained to council before, we treat all of our crews as one lot, if you like, so any additional works or any additional plant that's needed elsewhere on the mainland as well, that's where that will be actually diverted to. In the longer term, yes, we will be doing a review in terms of what may or may not be needed, not just for Bruny Island, but across the board. So that'll happen in the next couple of months.
Any further speakers? Councillor Westwood, do you want to sum up? I'll put the recommendation. It's moved by Councillor Westwood, seconded by Councillor Street. The recommendation is printed on the screen and at page 61. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried unanimously. We turn now to page 81, Spring Farm Play Space Community Engagement, with a recommendation on page 83. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved Councillor Street, seconded Councillor Fox. Councillor Street.
Thank you, Mayor. It gives me great pleasure to move the recommended motion on this one. As councillors would be aware, last year we resolved to go to public consultation on the spending of the balance of funds from land owned by council in Mount Pleasant Road that weren't going to be used for the upgrade of the Willowbend Park playground, but were going to be used for the development of a play space and recreation space within the Spring Farm or Whitewater Park estates. So we've gone to public consultation on that, and the report that's come back is really revealing, I think, about what the community in that area want. It's especially pleasing that we've had some 248 responses, and if you look at the cross-section or the demographic cross-section of those responses, we seem to have miraculously really hit the mark of where we should be on the consultation. More than half, almost two-thirds of respondents, or just over two-thirds of respondents in fact, live in the immediate area, and only 1% of respondents live outside of Kingborough, so we did really well there. And again, the age bracket, while it would be nice, I know, to have more responses from those under 18 who might actually be using the areas, that's always difficult. Next best thing is that 25 to 44 age bracket where the majority of our parents of those users are going to be sitting, and again, more than half, more than two-thirds of those responses are in that age bracket, so that's great as well. Finally, just pick out some of the comments that I really appreciated and hope we move forward with. One of the particular components of it was not just talking about play spaces, but talking about art in the park as well, which I think is a fantastic idea. A comment, don't try to jam too much in, simple's best, which I think is also really good guidance in these circumstances. And I did note, and I've seen firsthand the problems with this, but also the advantages. For a majority of the year, maybe water play is not such a great idea as well.
Water play is always a great idea.
Water play, yeah, may not be such a great idea in Tassie in June.
Look, come back when you're a parent and we'll have that debate.
So look, as I said, really pleased to move this one because I did really appreciate the consultation report and the effort that's gone into that. And hopefully, as we have a new council later in the year, we can move forward with utilising the consultation to build something really special for residents in the area.
Thank you, Councillor Street. I've got Councillor Midgley and then Councillor Fox. Oh, sorry, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Midgley, then Cordova, then Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. We love playgrounds. We've supported many playgrounds during this term of council. It's been fantastic, and I'd just like to acknowledge a local resident, David Bain, who lives in the area, working together with Deputy Mayor and I to actually put forward that motion to look at the funds from the sale of the land and the leftover towards Willow Park Playground, and I note that he's probably been a very big promoter of the engagement and things like that, so I'd like to acknowledge his work in there. And yes, Councillor Street gave a great summary, and the report is really great. It's really easy to read. It's fantastic that we had a lot of respondents. It's an area, I'm sure, that's just full of families who live there, and they are looking forward to a local playground, and noting as well that there was a high percentage of people that said that they would walk there, which is fantastic to see. Also, just a couple of questions from my end regarding this. So, noting that Inspiring Place will then go forward to develop, I guess, a concept plan. And I have been in conversation or email with Mr. Smee regarding that, so some of that consultation will actually come out of that 200,000 budget. Hopefully it's no more than about 15,000, because it'd be great to put as much as we can towards the project. On that one, so will then Inspiring Place go back to the community to say, like, this is what we're thinking for sort of stage one, and this is what we can do, I guess, as a concept plan? Is that the plan?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, yes, that is the intent. We will provide the report to Inspiring Place, and they will need to come up with a plan that takes into account the constraints of the site and the constraints of our funding, and then we'll check back in with the community to ensure that the plan that they've come up with is in line with the feedback that they've given us.
Thank you. And any sort of time frames about that?
Through you, Mayor, Inspiring Place, we'll be getting onto that very soon.
Thank you. And so stage one possibly could look at things, as the community have mentioned, like swings, seating and barbecue. Do you think that that could be a priority for the stage one, or depending on what Inspiring Place interpret from the report?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, the latter. I don't want to preempt what plan Inspiring Place might come up with, and bearing in mind the feedback we've got, there's a lot of ideas in there, and some of those are conflicting ideas between your traditional style play equipment versus nature-based play, so it will be somewhat of a challenge for Inspiring Place to make sense of all the feedback that has been provided and come up with something that's going to be fit the bill in terms of the majority community needs.
Thank you. And just a further note on that, I also saw, I can't see where it is, but from memory there was, people mentioned as well the importance of, I know it's outside the scope of this, but there was a mention about the importance of links and walking paths and connecting to other areas as also a high priority. And did anyone ask any questions about the road to nowhere, shall we call it? Or I just had a community member make comment today about what is sort of happening with that road, but did anybody mention anything in regards to this consultation about other matters and wondering what's happening to that road?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, no, the road didn't come up in the feedback, but I would point out that there are two pedestrian linkages connecting to the site of Rodway Court and the other road that I can't read, and we'll also be providing the new track through Spring Farm will also run adjacent to this site, so we'll provide a connection from that track as well. So it'll have really good active transport connectivity to this playground, to this play area. Yep.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this has been a productive discussion so far. The community consultation showed that most wanted to keep it simple and support for traditional play equipment and a mix of concrete and gravel paths. On the more expensive side, some of the suggestions, bike tracks, exercise equipment, outdoor gym for adults would also be welcomed. And I note 8.1, I think it is the potential risk of, I guess, people's expectations exceeding the possibility for resourcing, so we'll just be mindful of that. But other notable mentions were the idea of having a netball basketball court, or hoop at least, and toilet/parent space. And just in the design so far, am I correct in thinking that there's no public amenity? What are the designs for toilets?
There's no
Nothing.
public amenities. So this is a pocket park, like most of the parks. You'd be spending the entire amount on an
public
amenities
toilet.
block.
Yep, that's right. Thank you, Mayor. And so I welcome the concept that was suggested by one respondent for interpretive signage relating to native Tasmanian food plants, and also acknowledging the original owners there. Pedestrian linkages, as has been mentioned by my colleague Councillor Midgley, are so important, and plus public transport. So in among this discussion, I think it's prudent that we take a holistic approach about this, because we need to make sure that everybody has access, local residents, and also making sure that, for example, I had one constituent contact me saying that in Spring Farm they need a bus service. It currently takes 25 minutes to walk to the nearest bus stop at Merton Vale Circuit to get to Kingston, and it's fine to be building these park and rides if you have a car to get there, but really what we need is, rather than another lane on the outlet, for example, give us reliable, frequently accessed bus service, because it's hard carrying groceries on such a long walking route, and at night there are still no lights over the bridge to Spring Farm, or footpaths, lights along footpaths to catch the bus along the Channel Highway. So I wanted to take this opportunity to, I guess, reflect on what we're building here as community, and the way we're doing that is with really awesome pocket parks that are springing up. We're doing that with pedestrian linkages. We're doing that through making active transport easier, but another piece to this puzzle is making sure that the state government extends their free trial that was already proved to be a success, and that we can finally have free public transport, more frequent, more reliable, and really importantly, make it free for everyone. So I'm really pleased to see this community engagement, and I think that community engagements like this are how we get the best outcomes. So I commend the author and the authoriser. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Next, Councillor Fox.
Thank you. I agree with the speakers before me, but I just wanted to make a small point that I'm really pleased to see that the native vegetation is being retained within the pocket park, because providing shade with climate change is so important for children playing in this area. But I note that it's a very small area for the population density of this particular subdivision and the one next door, and wonder if there would be any other pocket parks being planned in this area.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, this is the only one we have planned at this stage. There are other parcels of open space within the Spring Farm and Whitewater estates, but this is the only one that we have on our books at the moment.
So, through you, Madam Chair, is it possible that we could plan for others in the future, in the next few months or year? Because I think it is something we need to plan for when we're getting such a rapid development in this area.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, anything's possible if we have the funding. I'm also mindful that we do have a lot of our existing playgrounds that need upgrading, and that comment's been made in this survey as well, that people that live outside of this particular area are very keen to see their local playground upgraded. So it's one of the many competing pressures that council have.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Any further contributions? Councillor Street, did you want to close the debate? If not, I will put the recommendation. It's as moved by Councillor Street, seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. I will note that at 6:22 p.m. that Councillor Grace left the meeting. We turn now to page 92, the proposed new road name in Blackmans Bay, with a recommendation on page 93. Looking for a mover, Councillor Fox, and a seconder, Councillor Midgley. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. I have pleasure in moving this motion. I think it's very appropriate that it is being named after the foundress of who called Nano Nagel, of the Presentation Sisters, on which the land is has been developed, and I think it's very nice to be commemorating that person. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Cordova and then Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Mayor. briefly, so I support this motion as well. Nana Nagle, 1718 to 1784, was known in her native Ireland and around the world for her help, for her work helping the poor and for delivering education to those to whom it was prohibited. A little tidbit is that in the year 2000, Nagle was voted Irish Woman of the Millennium, quote, in recognition of her importance as a pioneer of female education in Ireland. And in 2005, in a radio poll, she was voted Ireland's greatest woman ever. So I think that renaming the road Nano Drive is a fitting tribute to the linkages to the presentation sisters who first came out from Ireland to Tasmania in 1866 and for whom this area was very important. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Very interesting history there. Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Mayor. I also did a bit of Google searching, a bit of research. In addition to Councillor Cordova's trivia, Nano's motto was not words but deeds, and I think that's quite nice. I just had one question in relation to the name. Have we touched base with the presentation sisters to make sure that they're comfortable with us using that name?
Ms. Tyler Moore.
Through you, Mayor, the name was consulted with the applicant and there was no opposition. In fact, I think they may have helped recommend it.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fox, did you want to sum up?
It's very interesting contributions and it would be nice if we could note them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion as printed on page 93, moved by Councillor Fox, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Turn now to page 94, the Development Services Quarterly Report with a recommendation on page 100. I'm looking for a mover. I've got it in Councillor Street and a seconder in Councillor Cordova. Councillor Street.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll leave the report for discussion. I just have one question with respect to the planning appeal update. I'm wondering whether the hearing for DA 2021-548 has gone ahead, noting that I think the date must be wrong because it says that it would have started yesterday, which is a Sunday.
Ms. Tyler Moore.
Through you, Mayor, yes, that is incorrect, and I thought I had changed it. The applicant did request that the hearing be adjourned, and it's been adjourned till November.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. While we're on that DA 2021-548, so I note that the hearing has been adjourned till November. A few more questions on that. Is it possible, so we're looking now at page 98 of the agenda, this is for 50 apartments and the reduction of parking, lot 2, Goshawk Way, Kingston, and the question that I have is, can we please have more information, if possible, about whether the mediation was successful, and if not, why not? That's my first question on that.
Well, it was not successful because it was held in June. That's why there's now a hearing scheduled.
So I guess why not? It's my why was it not successful? Is really my question.
Ms. Tyler Moore.
Through you, Mayor, it was unsuccessful because there were no changes to the plans that changed Council's resolved position to refuse the application. There is an opportunity for the applicants to submit amended plans, which they may do so, which then could be considered if it was determined that they were of nature that we deemed was closer to aligning with the expectations of Council. Then we would bring it back to the Chamber for decision, because the decision was made in the Chamber, not under delegation.
Thank you, and just so I'm clear on that, through you, Mayor, so the plans for the proposal as yet have not necessarily been amended? Or,
that's correct.
And how substantial, I guess I'm just trying to, I'll ask a few questions and maybe I can just get some feedback broadly about these questions. If it hasn't been amended yet, how substantially would it need to be amended for? What are we asking for? Secondly, when will this proposal come back?
Okay, let's take them one at a time.
Okay.
Ms. Tyler Moore.
Yeah, so how substantially would it need to be amended?
Through you, Mayor, there's a not that fine line, but a sort of fine line with the applicant chooses to amend the plans, which under the formal provisions for Section 22 amendment, they can change it to an extent, a non-quantified extent, that doesn't transform the application too much. So if the tribunal were of a mind that the changes were too substantial. So as an example, if you were to go from a single tower to 2 towers, the tribunal and council as a party to the appeal may determine that's too significant, and the tribunal has the ability to require that they submit a fresh application, meaning they start all over again, or they may make changes that amend it to a degree that we would find addresses the main concerns that were raised within the chamber. So that was mainly around the built form, the presentation of the built form and bulk, as well as the car parking layout and insufficient parking provided. So we can't give you a quantifiable number of what that is. We can't tell the developer exactly what it is either, because it's up to the designer to resolve the issues. It's not our position. We are not designers to dictate exactly what they have to do. And we do encourage, and we certainly have met with the applicants on this a number of times, encourage those collaborations and meetings so that we can get closer to that. But to date, the amended plans haven't come in, and they haven't come in with their designers to resolve some of those.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful detail. And when it does, or if it does come back before council, will it be for a full decision of council as a planning authority, or is there any chance that this could actually go through it as a delegated authority?
And Ms Tullamore answered that already and indicated that because it was a decision of council, it would come back to council.
Back to us. Do councillors have a right to... Okay, no, that's fine. That makes sense. So basically, we just await until November, and then we'll know more. Yep. Okay, thank you. My second question is now about on page 98, DAS 2021 number 163/21S, which is 202 Channel Highway Commercial Development. Just a few brief questions on this one. What amendments have been made or requested? And then it says that, quote, the applicant has submitted a fresh application to council for assessment in case the amendment request is not allowed by the tribunal, end quote. Is this new application publicly accessible now? And what's the time frame for public scrutiny? And please briefly describe any major changes to the proposal.
Ms Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, the changes occurred mainly between the applicant and the representor. There was a representor who had interest from a neighbouring property, and they had gone along the way of making changes and suggestions. It included changes to the road network, which is a DSG road, and it removed one of the warehouses from memory. There was changes to the layouts of the car parking as well. We raised concern with the tribe when we got the amended plans, which is similar to the previous matter we were just talking about. We raised concern that the departure was too great, so the applicant's required to write to the tribunal justifying why they don't think it's too great, and but hedging their bets and trying to move the project on. They lodged a fresh application. That's in the process. I don't believe that it's on public notice yet, but I would need to check. I don't recall if it's on notice yet, and I can advise the councillors of that. In the event that so they're currently awaiting for the tribunal to make a call as to whether it's too substantial or not, and they've been waiting some time. If their new application gets to the end, well, one would assume that they would just abandon the appeal and just pick up the new application and approval if it's approved.
Okay. All right, thank you. Apart from that, I commend the report, but it's interesting to see, particularly I draw everyone's attention to page 94, the chart comparing the number of planning permit applications over the past 5 years, and I think it speaks for itself. Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. As always, this report is really great to have an update. A couple of questions. Page 97. Let Ms Tullamore find it. The table there that notes the numbers, single, residential, multiple, commercial, tourism. I'm just wondering, the tourism, is it possible to have a breakdown in regards to what component of, say, Airbnb approvals are part of that tourism number?
Ms Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, we can provide that. Obviously, offhand, I can't. It's not restricted to Airbnb. Just be mindful of it is visitor accommodation, so it's not necessarily under that platform, but we can break that down, yes.
Thank you. And on page 98, the first paragraph stating inquiries and included emails, phone calls, and those specifically about compliance matters. Again, it would be interesting to have a breakdown in regards to what compliance matters. For example, I'd be interested to know in regards to tree removals. matters.
Ms Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor. Apologies, there was actually meant to be a table in there. It's obviously dropped out a pie chart breaking that up. But with respect to the question, yes, we can provide advice about what those compliance matters are, which is also useful for us that we do look at that from time to time so that we can tailor any education, information or publications of things to watch out for that are specific to what's occurring in the municipality. So we can provide that via email to the councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Gladwright.
Thank you. I'm just interested in the progress of the local provision schedule. I note that there were some post-lodgement meetings, but now I'm reading this close. It was back in 2020. But I just wanted to know who attended those meetings, and can we have some more information about the SAPs?
Ms Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, the meetings were attended by myself, the Strategic Planner, Adrienne Stander, and Nikki DeNexter, our Senior Environmental Planner. In response to those, the post-lodgement meetings are a set requirement of the process, and the details about the SAPs and the discussions around the SAPs was about partly about the justification for them and the wording. It's very strict and very clerical about what you must answer, and there's a whole enormous raft of questions that have to be answered, so they were asking about that. Things that they wanted to know as well was about more background about things of significance. So obviously things like 40 spot Pardalote are very significant to us, and Swift Parrot, which is well known, but they want more evidence base in parts of those, or for it to be checked by another party. So we will potentially do that. We are changing the approach for some of the SAP. So originally we had, and this hasn't come to the chamber yet, it will come to the chamber because we think it's quite a change, is that we had, as an example, several SAPs for different areas, but they had similar characteristics. So we're going to move to hopefully, we need to get some direction from the TPC to have like a coastal settlement SAP for Kingborough. So that means the likes of Conningham and parts of Brenny Island and those sort of coastal townships will have a single SAP, but it's over different areas because you're allowed to do that. And because they're quite similar, the characteristics. So that's what we're hoping for. So before we bring it back to the chamber, because there is delegation for my position or the general manager to put back amendments to the LPS under the delegations policy, but where we think it's shifted a fair bit. The intent is still the same, but it's shifted a fair bit in the application approach. We'll bring it back to the chamber. But before we bring it back to the chamber, we will have those discussions with the TPC, because if they were to be of a mind to say, no way, then that would be a waste of time. So we'll get that check and then bring back to the chamber for consideration and for it to be re-endorsed, if you like, to go back to the TPC formally. I think you asked me probably about the timing. So we are required to give something back to the TPC by the end of the month. How long they take, unsure. Based on the dates provided in the report, the timeframes can be quite long.
Is this a potential workshop subject?
I imagine it would be before they come to here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Further comments? It was moved by Councillor Street. Did you want to sum up? Okay, I'm going to put the motion that the Development Services Quarterly Report be noted, moved by Councillor Street, seconded by Councillor Cordover. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Turning now to page 101. No notices of motion have been received, so that takes us to page, staying on the same page, confirmation of items to be dealt with in closed session. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. A mover in Councillor Fox and a seconder in Councillor Wass. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. In accordance with the Kingborough Council Meetings Audio Recording Guidelines Policy, recording of the open session of the meeting will now cease. So thank you very much to everyone for your attendance this evening, and to those people watching along at home on YouTube. The open session of Council is now adjourned at 6:50 p.m.